Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. Oh my goodness, CPU prices are going absolutely insane. Absolutely insane in October 2024. We just had Amazon Prime Day, Intel just launched new CPUs. We've got the 7800X3D sold out everywhere and the 9800X3D possibly launching very soon. We'll go through all the CPU news and we'll go through the best gaming CPU, mid-range gaming CPU, and high-performance gaming CPU right now. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Delete Me. Right now, your data is being sold to email spammers, robocalls, and leaving you at risk for fraud or identity theft. Getting data brokers to remove your data is insanely difficult by yourself. Don't give up. Get Delete Me. Delete Me's advanced tools and team of experts make removing your information easy. They give you regular reports on data removals, and they keep on monitoring for your data year-round. Take back control of your data by going to joindeleteme.com/PC20 and use code PC20 or use the link in the video description to receive 20% off a protection plan today. Let's start off with the Intel Alder Lake CPU launch. We're just going to very briefly go through the details here. Before we get to pricing, you can ignore the pricing listed on this slide because it's a lot more expensive than what you're seeing right here. We're going to go through the pre-order pricing, and the Z890 motherboards are also out. We'll take a look at some of the pricing there as well. Basically, they've done away with i5, i7, i9 in favor of Ultra 7, Ultra 5, Ultra 9. I don't know why. And they've changed the numbering scheme too. So starting at the top, and these are basically the same core counts as their relevant CPUs in the 14th gen. So the Ultra 9 285K has 8 P cores and 16 E cores. The Ultra 7, just like the i7 14700K, has the 8 P cores and 12 E cores, and the Core Ultra 5 245K has 6 P cores and 8 E cores, just like the 13600K or 14600K. But what about performance? Here's Intel's first-party data. First-party data, take it with a massive grain of salt. Obviously, we will have third-party reviews later, closer to the October 24th launch date, but this is their numbers for the Ultra 7 265K versus the i9 14900K. I don't know why they didn't compare the Ultra 9 versus the i9. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they're saying 188 less watts of power used by the Ultra 7 than the i9 14900K, 15 degrees temperature lower, but 5% less gaming performance. So they're saying, hey, we're giving you about the same gaming performance and massive power savings and massive thermal savings as well. And then of course they're comparing it here to the Ryzen 9950X, and they're basically saying the Core Ultra 9 285K is on par with the 9950X, which we know is slower than the 7800X3D by quite a bit in gaming. So that's kind of where they're going. Essentially, they're just making this argument that, hey, we're way better in creator workload, so we're going to be a great gaming and hybrid kind of workstation CPU out there. It's a very similar argument that the Ryzen made in the early days, but Ryzen was a lot cheaper. So let's focus in on what those Intel CPU prices are. Looking over Newegg pricing right now in terms of the pre-order, $629 for the Ultra 9, 285K, quite a bit more expensive than the $589 they had on the suggested retail price out there. You got $399 for the Ultra 7 265KF. The K version of this is $20 more expensive at $419. And then they've got the Core Ultra 5 245K pegged at $299. And you can get this right now. This is the cheapest among them. I will say for some reason, the K version with the actual integrated graphics on it is $30 more to $329. So I don't really quite understand the pricing on these, but quite expensive. Looking over the Z890 motherboards, and I really haven't done a super deep dive like I like to do for our motherboard guides. And we will have a motherboard guide for Z890, by the way, so stay subscribed for that. So the boards basically start around $189, which is not terrible. And in fact, much better than previous generations of Z series motherboards, I should say. $199, kind of $209, $219 for a lot of the ASRock and Gigabyte boards out there. ASUS actually comes in with one of the cheapest, actually the cheapest micro ATX board out there at $229 with the ASUS Prime Z890M plus Wi-Fi. So the 2 thumbs up there. Got the color theme boards in here for $229. It does look like an interesting set of motherboards out there, and the VRMs, I have just basically peeked at those. They're way overbuilt, just like they were for the B650 boards and everything. So I wouldn't really worry about that. One of the boards that jumps off the page to me immediately is the ASRock Z890 Live Mixer. upgraded audio. It's got a lot of other upgraded features, and it's $240. Again, I haven't done a deep dive on these boards. That might not be the best one in terms of price to performance, but if you're wondering about the price, they start around $200. I'd say the mid-range for these boards, probably more like $260, then up to into low 300s, and then they go up from there to obviously the really, really crazy boards. Of course, just when you think Intel may be making a comeback, it looks like maybe AMD is ready to knock them out. What am I talking about? We now have multiple rumors here that the 9800X3D, the Ryzen 9800X3D, is going to be pushed forward and launched as soon as possible this year. They're talking about anytime between October and November to get it pushed forward. And this has been confirmed basically in a couple different places. Gigabyte accidentally, I'm going to use accidentally in air quotes because sometimes this is how AMD likes to leak things through their partners, confirmed this in a press conference when they said that the 9950X and the 9900X 3D are not going to launch with the 9800X 3D. That's going to launch first. So obviously, what do we think? That means that they're pushing it forward. Also, Moore's Law is dead. Another YouTuber often gets things right. Has gotten some things wrong, but often gets things right. Is saying he's now seen final marketing materials for the 9800X3D, and it's basically shoved out the door as quickly as possible because AMD realizes nobody's buying Ryzen 9000. Intel now is coming with potentially a competitive architecture out there, and they don't really have an answer except their older CPUs, which they can, continue to sell at a discount. That's maybe not the worst thing, but they want to have the best performing gaming CPU out there to utterly crush it. And that would be the 9800X3D. So just stay tuned for that. And maybe we need that 9800X3D as soon as possible because you cannot get the 7800X3D literally anywhere unless you're willing to pay a stupid amount of money and go to eBay or a scalper or something like that. Here's Amazon right now, completely sold out of any kind of sane options. If you go over to Newegg, it's essentially the same thing. It's, the price is $419, but it's auto-notified, means it's out of stock. The 7900X3D and 7950X3D have also suffered the same fate, basically. Now, I did reach out to AMD, and they said, listen, nothing has changed on their side. They're still sending it to retail. They're still making it. It's just that the demand has been so intense and they're just not able to meet the demand right now for the CPU, which does make sense with Intel essentially not being an option, 13th and 14th gen, and it being the fastest gaming CPU on the planet with Ryzen 9000 trailing kind of badly behind it. This is the CPU that everyone's going gaga for. And of course, on the 13th and 14th Intel CPU degradation front, Intel says it's finally fixed it with their last update. It's the 0x12B update to the microcode, which was blowing up their CPUs. Basically, it was degrading the CPUs by overvolting them and messing with the voltage minimum in there as well. So if you have one of these Intel CPUs, make sure you update your BIOS to this. I'm still not ready to recommend 13th to 14th gen Intel just because I want to make sure that this is actually a fix and there's not more BIOS updates down the line. Remember, they released a first update, then a second update, and I believe this is at least the third update where they say, oh, it's fixed now. So go ahead, update your BIOS to that. That would be my recommendation if you own one of these CPUs. And for everybody else, just stand pat. Maybe one day I'll be able to recommend them. Let's jump into CPU pricing, but before we get there, let's talk about the Amazon Prime Day deals for October, because I think these are going to be a harbinger of what we're going to see in both the upcoming pre-Black Friday sales as well as the Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday and all the holiday sales. What did we see? Well, we saw Ryzen AM4 CPUs get super cheap again. Ryzen 5600X got down to $112, insane value for that CPU. A $181 5700X 3D for those of you who are looking to upgrade out there. Now, while the Ryzen 7600X didn't get back to its $180 price, which it had been sitting at, it actually got back up to more like $200. Newegg did some interesting things with combo deals with like an SSD. So you could get a CPU SSD combo deal, which basically took the CPU down to about $169 for the Ryzen 7600X. But unfortunately, more often than not, I was putting up posts like this, the 7800X 3D, it's in stock, hurry. And then like literally 15 minutes later, I'd have to delete the post because it was all gone. Let's jump into CPU pricing. We're going to quickly go through the Intel side. Obviously, we're not recommending the 13th and 14th gen CPUs. 12th gen, I think, is okay right now. And we'll also look at the Ultra 5, Ultra 7, Ultra 9 pricing that we've already gone through. How does that compare? For the budget CPUs, honestly, the one to look for right now is the i3-13100, $79 right now. That's a great value CPU. i5 12400, kind of still sitting around $111. 12600K, not a a big change, but it continues to sink down in price. The big winner there is the i7-12700K, so maybe some of you productivity users may look at that. Of course, there were huge price cuts on Intel 13th and 14th gen unlock CPUs, and honestly, I think they really need them. Maybe they didn't go far enough, because you can get a 13600K for $200 right now, or a 14600K for about $200 as well. Those CPUs had been stubbornly sitting at $300 for quite a long time. But look at the Ultra 5 245K. That's where that thing is coming in at $299. And that's for the KF version. The K version is like $320 or $330. Totally insane pricing to me. I don't know what Intel is thinking. And then we got the Ultra 7 coming in at $399. Look at the 14700K, $327. You're like, Jason, those CPUs were blowing up. I mean, if you got to say that your price is justified because at least the CPU won't blow up, I don't know if that's a great argument. Jumping over to Ryzen pricing, we've already talked about the Ryzen 5600 and 5700X 3D, really well priced still, even after the Prime Day deals. They're still at $112 for Ryzen 5600X, great budget gaming CPU. We'll see where that one ranks in the best budget gaming CPUs out there. 5700X 3D is still at $188 right now. The Ryzen 7600-7600X has come up. Look at that, 197 off 181. Obviously, that CPU remains the entry point for AM5 if you want to get an AM5, and it's got pretty good gaming uplift. And unfortunately, those CPUs, maybe they're going to be in a little bit limited supply, especially given the fact that the 7800X 3D has also completely sold through. Now, I just put the price of $450 in because that has generally been what they are selling at. Would I buy them for that? It's just hard to say. I know I've got a lot of questions about that, like what the limit should be when you're buying a 7800X 3D right now. Especially given that we may get a 9800X 3D, although we don't know what the pricing is, and I suspect AMD is going to want to charge a pretty penny for the best gaming CPU on the planet. 7900X 3D and 7950X 3D have gone totally bonkers because, of course, they're selling out because the 7800X 3D is selling out, and people just want something with X3D on it. Meanwhile, there's absolutely no real price cut for the 9600X. Blows my mind. I don't know what AMD is doing with that CPU. 9700X has come down a little bit from its launch price, as has the 9900X, but the 9950X right now is sold out everywhere. Sold out everywhere the same day that Intel announced the Ultra 9 285K. So that tells me that maybe some people were waiting around to get the biggest, baddest production machine out there, and they've decided to go Ryzen. Let's jump into the best gaming and production CPUs in October 2024. And if you're not familiar with how we do this, basically take all of these CPUs, we put them in a big spreadsheet with the CPU cost, with the cost for the RAM, cost for the motherboard, cost for the cooler, and we come up with a total platform cost. Then we divide that by either their gaming score or their multi-core score for both production and gaming, and we come up with a price to performance. We divide them up by budget, mid-range, and high-end. So if you want to jump into the spreadsheet, it's listed down in the video description. You can go in here, you can change the configurations if you want, or you can even change the pricing. Some quick updates on the spreadsheet itself. I basically try to estimate where I think the Intel Core Ultra CPUs are going to be. I've also tried to estimate the impact of the Windows 24H2 update to both Ryzen and Intel CPUs out there. I've put it all in the notes. You can check everything if you want. Obviously, these are just estimates. We are going to get benchmarks towards the end of the month, and I'll compile a completely new score for everything. So take these with a grain of salt. Let's jump into the best budget gaming CPU 2024. So this is where like the total platform price is $450 or less. And honestly, I absolutely love the Ryzen 5600, 5600X. Look at that. You're like, Jason, it's number 2 up there. Yeah, but $251 for the total platform, $251 for the total platform price, that's insane. That is insane. And it's a super powerful gaming CPU that will take you up kind of almost into the mid-range of some GPUs out there. The Ryzen 5500 and the i3-13100, I think they're okay for ultra budget gaming PCs. Their big problem is that no PCIe Gen 4 on the Ryzen 5500, which is increasingly becoming important as AMD and NVIDIA basically cut costs on lower end GPUs and require PCIe Gen 4 on a lot of them to get the full bandwidth or full FPS out of those GPUs. And the 13100 is just a little bit weaker of a CPU. And the 5600, 5600X, honestly, for not that much more, going to give you tons more gaming performance. The i5-12400, it's fine. Very similar performance to the 5600 or 5600X, except not really any good upgrade path that I'm willing to recommend at this point, because with the 5600 or 5600X, you're just going to drop a 5700X 3D in there one day, probably even when that CPU is super cheap. Maybe you'll even get one used. The rest of this stack, I mean, honestly, for a budget gaming PC, I'm looking at the 5600X. That's really where I'm going. Jumping over the best mid-range production PC. So this is where the multi-core score is 170 or greater, and the price is less than $750. And honestly, this is a category that Intel continues to dominate. But before we jump into who's dominating right now, where's the Ultra 5 245K? I almost said i5. I had to catch myself there. Look at that. It's towards the bottom of the stack. The 9900X is a better performer than it. The 7900X is a better performer. I mean, 7900X you can get for $320 right now. That is insane value, by the way. If you have about $400 to spend right now, I would go with the i7 12700K, either a DDR4 or DDR5 setup. That's why it's listed in there twice. One's a DDR4 version, one's a DDR5 version. If you want to save a little bit of money, I don't know, maybe like $60 or $100, the 12600K is also a fantastic value with a good value B660, kind of more budget tier motherboard out there. And honestly, the rest of this stack, it's hard to recommend. Obviously, I'm not going to recommend 13th and 14th gen Intel out there, but where's Ryzen? Ryzen really doesn't have an answer until you get to the middle of this stack as well. So I'm just not sure where Intel's going with their new Core Ultra series, especially on the Ultra 5 or the i5 version of it. But if you're looking for the best value right now, that 12700K looks really good. Jumping over the best gaming CPU 2024 in the mid-range in October. So this is where the gaming score is 130 or greater. So this is like the GPUs that you want to pair with it is like anything like the RX 7800 XT or higher, or RTX 4070 and higher. Those kinds of GPUs as they get to the more mid-range. And the total price is $750 or less. And honestly, here we are. Same three CPUs continue to dominate this category. Continue to dominate. Although I will say the 13600K and 14600K, now that they've gotten like a $100 price cut on them, as well as the Z690 and Z790 motherboards have absolutely cratered in terms of their price as well, because they're just trying to get rid of these things at this point. They have come substantially up the stack. The 5700X 3D, in terms of building a new system, I probably wouldn't do it. It's only another $50 for the 7600X, which has been hurt by rising prices, both on that as well as some of the motherboard prices. Went up a little bit around after Prime Day, I should say, because things just sold out. I think those motherboard prices will come back down. That being said, I'd probably go with the 7600 or 7600X just to get on the AM5 platform so I can drop into 7800X 3D, or much more likely drop in a 9800X3. Ryzen 7700, 7700X, honestly, it's only like $50 more, $40 more than the 7600. It might actually make some sense there, give you more in terms of the multi-core performance. That being said, I run like an entire recording studio off the Ryzen 7600X here. Never have any problem, and it's super easy to cool. As we get further down the stack, I just wonder what's going on with like the 9600X, 9700X. Need some serious price cuts to it. The rest of the stuff on the stack just doesn't make any sense unless you've got a super big GPU, as we'll see. Jumping over the best performance production CPU. So this is where the multi-core score is 315 or greater. And yes, Intel continues to dominate, but those are 13th and 14th gen CPUs that we really can't recommend anymore. So I'm almost want to delete them off the list so we can see what we're actually looking at here. What we're actually looking at, remember, these are extrapolated numbers from Intel's first party data. We will get actual benchmarks at the end of the month, but at least with that stuff, the Ultra 7 265K, look at that thing. It would top this chart in terms of price to performance for big production machines out there. So maybe this supports Intel's argument right now that, hey, our platform is really going to kick some butt for creators, for people who need lots of cores, lots of threads, and it's going to be pretty decent for gaming as well at lower power usage. And maybe that's a decent argument out there. We'll have to wait and see for those benchmarks. 7950X and 9950X, obviously big production CPUs out there, and you have future upgradability. Intel's made no comment, by the way, on whether or not you'll be able to even upgrade one more generation on that platform. Let's jump into the best gaming CPU 2024 at the high end in October. So this is where the gaming score is 160 or greater. And look at that, the 7800X 3D has been knocked from its perch, knocked from the number one spot in this category for the first time that I can remember. Honestly, it's been a long time, pretty much since the 7800X 3D really came out, at $450. $450. Now, that's the reason it's been knocked out. It's still the fastest gaming CPU. I want to make that very clear. It's still the fastest right now, at least, until we get maybe the 9800X3D, but it's the price to performance. It simultaneously held best CPU, best fastest CPU, and best price to performance in this category. Something that really no CPU that I can remember has ever done. Maybe the 5800X3D, but I don't really think we looked at the 5800X3D in this way as much because, it was more of an upgrade path for a lot of folks out there. Let's also talk about the Intel Core Ultra CPUs. Where are they? Where are they? They don't even meet the threshold for this category, at least with Intel's own data. Intel's own data basically shows, and if anything, they're probably over-exaggerating, right? Shows that the Ultra 9 285K for $629 barely makes this list and is terrible in terms of price and performance. The platform cost is over $1,000. Even the 7800X3D with its stupid CPU pricing right now, because it's out of stock, $715 for the platform cost. Intel, you've got to do something about that. Your other CPUs don't even make the list because they're not performative enough. So it's just like, what is the Intel option in the high-end gaming space? It essentially doesn't exist. That's a real big problem. Let's play everyone's favorite game. Should you buy now or should you wait? Well, man, we just had CPU launches. We had Prime Day sales, or we've got early Black Friday sales coming down the pike, and possibly a Ryzen 9800X 3D launch. Boom! Just crazy. And GPU prices, by the way, I know we didn't go over those. They have been slashed dramatically on the Radeon side as AMD just hurriedly tries to clear out everything ahead of their next generation launch, which is going to be mid-range GPUs. That's why they're having to clear out everything. It's not high-end, it's mid-range. So should you buy now? Well, let's start off at the budget end. Honestly, budget builders, there's nothing new coming for you. I would just buy. The Ryzen 5600, $110. Just eat that thing up, man. That is an amazing gaming CPU. If you're looking to do it for a production system, I think the i7 1200K, great system, not bad in terms of the gaming, but honestly, if you're gaming first, get that Ryzen 5600. It's going to do you a real solid, and it'll take you up to a GPU like an RX 7700 XT. You can get it with 2 free games. For mid-range builders out there, I mean, listen, maybe the 7600 will get a little cheaper, but that's really the CPU you want. You can maybe spend a little bit more on the 7700 or 7700X. Just know that you won't see the gaming performance if that helps get you to another tier of GPU, the cost difference there. And right now, Radeon GPUs the costs are being cut massively on it. You can get a 7900 XT for the same price as the 4070 Super. Obviously, get the 7900 XT. That's just an insane difference right there. So for mid-range builders, again, I don't expect AMD's going to want to cut the 9600 pricing probably until January. Seems like they're going to get super stubborn with the Ryzen 9000 stuff. What are you really going to upgrade to? The 9800 X3D is going to be out of your price range. I would just pull the trigger on one of those. And then we've got the high-end folks. For the high-end folks, I know, listen, you can continue to try and chase down a 7800 X3D. How much more performance is the 9800 X3D really going to give you at the GPU level that you're looking at, unless you have like a 4090 or a 5090? Probably won't see that much difference, especially at like 4K that you're probably playing at anyway. So maybe you just buy it now, 7800 X3D. Get it going. The 9800 X3D, for all we know, it's going to be sold at a stupid price. It's going to be sold out. It's going to be scalped and all that kind of stuff. I just never like to wait, I never like to wait for products that haven't even been announced, let alone that are in this kind of really tough environment. It's kind of almost shades of the GPU crisis a couple of years ago, where you just kind of felt like maybe I should just grab this and just get something now. That being said, if you want to wait for the 9800 X3D, I could certainly understand doing that. And just know, it may not even come in the fall. You might be waiting until January. It'll definitely come in January. I feel very, very confident about that. Less confident about it coming earlier, though that's all the leaks and the rumors that we're hearing right now. So if you are waiting, you're essentially waiting for the 9800 X3D. That being said, I think if you can get a 7800 X3D at a decent price, I'd snap that up. Remember, if you got value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe, click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Speaking of cool content, did you check out our best builds for October? There's tons of sales in October, often better than Black Friday. Check it out. Builds from $800, $1,200, and $1,750 right here. And we'll catch you on the next one.